Hello, I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the Scotch Whisky podcast. Today, I'm delighted to say we're talking to Gary Mills from Loch Lomond Whisky, one of the most iconic Scottish names, and friend of the programme, Max McFarlane.
All it took was one sip of the water of life.
Hi, I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the whisky podcast. We're in the Strathduie Whisky Bar in the middle of Glasgow. With me, Gary Mills from Loch Lomond Whisky and Max McFarlane, Master Blender. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on. Tell me about Loch Lomond Whisky.
So, Loch Lomond Whisky, we've been on the current site since 1966. But it's got history dating back to 1816 in terms of the actual Loch Lomond Distillery. But if we go back to Little Mill and the kind of basis of where Loch Lomond started, then it goes all the way back to 1772.
It's a beautiful neck of the woods, Loch Lomond, isn't it? I mean, classical Scottish beauty. What's it like having a distillery right there?
Oh, but look, we are very, very blessed to be named after the iconic loch. The kind of downside to it for us is we're about a mile away from the loch itself, so we're deep in an industrial estate, so we've not quite got the outlooks and the visage that everybody expects, but it's a good basis for when you think of selling Scotch around the world to have the name Loch Lomond is a great head start, that's for sure.
Max here went on a spying mission.
Yeah, I went down. I was saying to you, but you know, it doesn't really matter. It's a Scotch whisky distillery. It's employing lots of people.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't really matter where it is. If it's employing people, you know, and you've got a future, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Really.
No, and I think it's one of the things that's where it's kind of very similar to Deanston if you think of it, like founded in the 60s when kind of single malt started to become in the conscience. Obviously everything before that was blends. So by building a distillery into an existing site, so the site we're in used to be a dye factory, and the distillery itself used to be the old boiler house, so it had access to water. And what it means is that because you're retrofitting into an existing building, you obviously get a bit of a head start on the build. But it means that when you look at it, it's maybe not the most pretty, the most picturesque distillery looking. But you can, by looking at it, you know that the investment in that distillery is going on the important bit on the inside, and that's spirit quality.
It's Scottish too.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, one of my first jobs was building the Alexandria City Bike, but the Alexandria bypass.
Yeah.
Am I older than? I think I'm older than both of you. You used to have to drive through those places, Balach, Alexandria, to go to the Loch.
Yeah.
Then they built the bypass. Yeah. You're looking at me as if it's...
No, that's obviously that's my kind of daily commute on a fairly regular basis, yeah.
And I'm actually older than him. I used to play against him.
Oh, skin me. Rugby, skin me in the outside. Tell me about the whiskies. And the market that you're in is this huge global market, Scotch whisky, this product that goes around the world. Tell me about your whiskies.
So we've got a great range of whiskies, and I think we would quite modestly call ourselves Scotland's most capable and adept distillery. We've got this great history that kind of really comes from a foundation of blended Scotch. So the Loch Lomond group, as it is now, has only been in existence for about 10 years. Prior to that, the real focus of the distillery was our main blend's High Commissioner. And the way that distillery and the capabilities have developed is through a want to be kind of self-sufficient, to be able to create as much of that blend as we can ourselves. And what that's meant for us from the Loch Lomond group point of view now is that we've got access to a wonderful variety of malts, which we can then pull together into this range that it has evolved over the last 10 years, but I think we've now set on a kind of fairly a signature style for us as fruit, honey sweetness and soft smoke. Right. Which we've kind of got running through the core, but then there are kind of some extremes that we'll be able to get into. We're going to go through the malts themselves.
Have you tasted them, Max?
No, not at all.
Are we going to have a little nose of some?
Yeah, absolutely.
Today?
Yeah,
okay, all right. Well, all right. So, where are you selling? Everywhere?
Yes, pretty much globally. We're in over 100 markets worldwide now, and it's what I love seeing is with the range that we've got. It means that a lot of the different products do really well in different markets. It's not the same malt as much as the signature style really is embodied in the red Loch Lomond 12. They're perfectly balanced, but there are markets all over the world where different malts, down to different tastes in different markets, and whether they're malt led, some are very value led, so it tends to be the kind of the kind of non-age statements or things like the single grain that do really well. So
You talked about the heritage, Max, and they've got a Little Mill distillery. Part of the heritage is that. How important is it that you build on that kind of thing?
Oh, you've got Loch Lomond to start with. That's a heritage-driven. Even if you didn't have a distillery, the name is virtually the same. Little Mill will be in most Scotch whisky aficionados' mind because they remember it, and remember it fondly. So you can build on that. But the big build for Gary and the company is obviously the word Loch Lomond. Like we have Clyde built, but Loch Lomond, you could virtually not pick a better name for your single malt and grain.
Can you use the tune, or is it trademarked?
No, I don't
Real
think so. No,
Staccato.
I think that's probably still trademarked on that one. Yeah,
But
definitely.
John's in a band. He could make a. I was going to say that
John's
anyway.
a bad band. A bad covers band. But you can't use the tune for the marketing.
No, well,
or can you?
no. We probably could if we paid for it. But there are quite a few kind of Loch Lomond elements that have possibilities. I mean, the other one that a lot of people, specifically kind of the Belgians and a lot of the Europeans, bring up is Tintin. So Loch Lomond is the whiskey of choice for Captain Haddock.
You've lost me.
So Tintin,
You've lost Max too.
it's a
Yeah, I know. I remember Tintin.
So Captain Haddock, his whiskey of choice is Loch Lomond single malt. But that predates the Loch Lomond distillery as it was. Ultimately, it was them picking a famous name, a recognisable Scottish name, and creating a whiskey brand from it.
So they had him drinking Loch Lomond whiskey before there was a Loch Lomond whiskey?
Yes.
Wow, I never knew that. I never knew that. Tintin.
Yep, Tintin.
It's Herge's Adventures of Tintin.
That's the very one.
That's
The
The
one
cartoon
and same.
from
Yeah.
the 1960s. All right, you've won. You've won the race.
The unfortunate thing for us is that Captain Haddock's maybe not the most responsible drinker. No, he's not the iconic responsible drinker that we should be basing any marketing campaigns off of anytime soon.
You famously, I think, have different stills. Is that right?
Yes,
And maybe Max can talk about the importance of that. But you have
we have 3 types of stills, 4 if you include kind of 2 different column stills. So you've got the kind of iconic swan neck pot still that every distillery in kind of Scotland has. But we then have our straight neck pot stills, which are unique to Loch Lomond because they were developed by a man called Duncan Thomas who owned Little Mill from the 1930s through into the 1960s. We then also have a column still made of 100% copper and a column still from stainless steel as well. And that's what allows us to be able to create a real myriad of spirits. Again, it's from that. It's given us the tools to be able to create blends. A bit like I said, it's
You don't have to. You don't really have to go to the market for grain.
no exactly that. If you think of when you're making a blended Scotch, so historically it'll be around about 90% grain whiskey, and then 10% malts, with all the flavour coming from the malts. And unless you are a Diageo or a Pernod, you need to go to the market, as Max says, to buy, whether it's buy your grain, but also to buy different flavour profiles, different styles of malt. But ultimately, the previous owner of the company, Sandy Bullock, he just wanted to be able to, he didn't want to be at the behest of anyone else. So he built a distillery that is ultimately capable of creating any regional style of Scotch,
right,
with the exception of Campbelltown, but then that's why they bought Glen Scotia. So we've got these amazing styles of malt. We've got our own grain distillery. We've got our own cooperage on site. We've got our own bottling hall. The only thing we don't really do is malt our own barley, but that's a labour-intensive and time-intensive piece that only one distillery still really does. I think.
Very few.
Now, before we get back to Gary and Max, we've teamed up with the good people at Loch Lomond Whisky so you can get a little bit off one of their drams. First, make sure you're a subscriber to Cask to Glass. Click subscribe on YouTube or follow us on whatever podcast platform you're on. Then head to the Loch Lomond Whisky's website. Now, the first 100 people will get 10% off their order as a thank you for listening to Cask to Glass. That's 10% off when you order from the Loch Lomond Whisky website on anything up to their 18-year-old whiskies. Just enter the code Cask to Glass 10, Cask to Glass 10 at the checkout. 10% off. Use that code Cask to Glass 10 at checkout. Full terms and conditions are in the show notes for this episode. It's a limited time offer, so pick up a bottle today and make sure you subscribe to Cask to Glass so you don't miss out on any future offers. How important is the still, in terms of producing whiskey?
It's very important, on the condensate. Depends on the condensate coming out that way or that way or that way, But chemically, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you chemically just exactly what difference it makes. I know that I think it's an extended arm is estery, sweeter, I think. And then it all depends on, more often than not, I'm not sure if there is even a great scientific knowledge out there about it. I think some of it might be a bit romantic.
Oh, really?
And
I think
there'll be like the guys at Forsyth and things that make a lot of the stills will be able to, if you go to them with an idea of what you want your spirit to be, they can give you the suggestions of, right, so you want a big wide base, you might want the big onion bulb in the neck and things like that. But I think like Max said, that the specifics and the kind of chemical side of things I think are still a bit out there.
When you look at your whiskies then, you said you tried, I'm trying to remember, honey. It was honey,
fruit, honey sweetness and soft smoke.
Right. And Max, where do they come from? Where does that play into how you make the whiskey?
It's
The
essentially
cask.
cask again.
The cask.
We go back to the cask, at the end of the day, we wouldn't have a job unless we had really good casks.
Yeah.
At the end, you can talk about anything you like. You don't have good casks, you won't have good whiskey. It doesn't matter what anyone says. You don't have good whiskey. Don't have good casks, you won't have good whiskey. You can then decide. Sorry, Gary. You can then decide you want a sherry based.
Yeah.
You can have 100% sherry if you want. But then sourcing good refill casks is actually very good as well, because the word refill just means, well, how many times has it been filled? So the more time it's been filled, the less maturation you're going to get out of it. So you need coopers, more often than not, it's coopers or Gary and I can tell if we're nosing something that's going into High Commissioner, right, okay, that cask there's done. You're not going to get anything out of that cask. So that cask is then, put aside.
How do you know it's done?
Oh, you can tell from just the maturation.
Just from
And also the colour. So if High Commissioner's 8 years old, if it's been in a half-decent cask, there'll be a certain amount of colour in it, But if you pick one up and it's got absolutely no colour in it, but it's okay to go in. It's not got an off note, but it's okay to go in. But you say to the cooper, don't fill that again. Don't send that back round the corner to the distillery. We're not using that again. So some of it's visual, but most of it is on the nose.
Where do you get your casks? And how big how problematic is that market becoming then if everybody wants the cask?
I suppose that's one of the good things about us having our own cooperage. So we,
Right.
with the volume we produce, I think as a group we hold close to 500,000 casks. But a lot, so obviously primarily American oak. Everything we distill is matured in ex-bourbon casks. And we'll source them from a variety of American distilleries. It's more about, as with a lot of things at Loch Lomond, it's more about the quality rather than the kind of specifics. So as long as, whether it's Heaven Hill, Wild Turkey, Jim Beam, we'll use most of them. But it's down to having the cooperage. So we're in a very fortunate position that because it's a full service cooperage, one of the key things we've got is a De-char Re-char process, which allows us to once we've used that cask, so most distilleries will use a cask 3 times. As Max said, it's ultimately the wood becomes, saturated with the spirit, so it means the air's not getting into the cask, it's not maturing the whiskey in the same way. And most distilleries after that 3rd time will get rid of that cask, whether it goes off to garden furniture or pots. But our De-char Re-char process allows us to essentially reset that cask. So we'll de-char it by stripping off some of that charcoal on the inside and then burning it. Essentially just putting a massive flamethrower inside it, putting a fresh layer of char inside, so that burns off all the alcohol that was in it. So you don't get any of the vanillas and the bourbons influence. It's just that wood influence, but it gives us another 3 times to be able to use that cask. And we can do that twice. So ultimately we can use the cask up to 9 times. That obviously helps us from that kind of wood management point of view, rather than having to keep going back to the market again and again and again.
Yeah, because it seems to be the big market, casks. Is that the problem market? Getting hold of the right casks. Were you making your own casks?
No. So
Your own cooperage?
it's repairing and rejuvenating.
Repairing.
Yeah.
Right.
supplying cask now is very difficult.
Yeah.
We all know how many distilleries are opening up
Yeah.
in Europe. Spanish and American oak currently, but there's now French oak, Romanian oak, Mongolian oak. There's oak coming. I mean, I remember the day at Glengoyne where they actually tried to build casks from Scottish oak because we've got hundreds of them.
Yeah.
But the problem
Wild
was
oak.
because it's not warm enough here, the growth rings weren't tight enough. So you put some spirit into a Scottish that just forgive me, just pissed out the side. You know.
You said that word twice.
I know. I need
Once last week.
But you know, there's lots of different things on the go. But effectively, worldwide, it's oak,
Right.
and the prices are shooting up dramatically because of the not shortage. It's just because there's a huge market for them now.
Yeah, we just need to hope the Americans don't rescind the one use for bourbon.
Mr. Trump.
Can we nose a few of these? Is that possible? Just to maybe, you guys are the experts, and Max can tell us what, and you can tell me what you are trying to do. Because I actually bought a bottle of your branded whiskey as a present going out. It was the Campbelltown one.
Oh, bro, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be
I didn't
like
realise it was
the
a Campbelltown
Campbelltown
distillery.
Harbour.
Campbelltown Harbour. So what is this one?
So this is one of our single grains.
Oh.
So the four whiskies I've got are kind of essentially the best way to talk through. It's the why we do what we do at Loch Lomond through these four whiskies. So this is, like I said, our single grain. It's made in our continuous column still, copper column still. So the two main differences between that and most other column stills.
I was just about to drink it there, but
No, sorry. No, go. You go for it.
keep going.
So most column stills are made out of stainless steel. Ours is 100% copper. And most continuous stills are used for grain whisky, whether that's wheat, normally wheat, based in Scotland, and we're using 100% malted barley. So the only other two distilleries in the world, to my knowledge, that are making whisky in that way as well are Nikka in Japan, but they can call their spirit Kofi malt because they are in Japan. And then there's, I think it's Copper Rivet in England, and they can call theirs a copper column single malt. But again, they're not governed by the SWA. But because we're in Scotland, we can't use the word single malt.
So if I said the word popcorn, am I?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is around 5-6 years old.
Told me to say that. He was going, popcorn. We've already done a programme.
Fair enough. Around 5-6 years old, refill American oak. That's said 100% malted barley, 46% in chill filter.
You like it, Max?
The nose is really nice as well.
It's legitimately one of my favourite spirits we produce. Yeah,
Gentle. That's not a sharp whiskey at all. That's a gentle.
but for a young whiskey as well.
Yeah.
It's very, very approachable. So most single grain whiskies are wheat based, which is essentially, because it's grain spirit, it's essentially grain neutral spirit. So it needs 20, 25, 30 years in a cask to draw all that flavour. But it's also why they'll cost you 150 quid a bottle. But because this is 100% malted barley, it retains so much more of that flavour, so much more of that character, and it's why we can bottle that at 5-6 years old and only charge you 30 quid a bottle.
If you're enjoying Cask to Glass, the Whisky Podcast, with me, John Beattie, we'd love you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on socials at C2G Whisky. That's the letter C, numeral 2, letter G, followed by the word whiskey. And please keep on listening. I asked Maxie a different time, what do you think the best whiskey is in the world?
Whichever one you have in your glass right now. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's down to so many different circumstances. It's who you're with, it's when you're drinking it, it's where you're drinking it. As long as you've got a whiskey in your glass and you're enjoying it, then that's the right one for just now.
And how do you take your whiskey?
Mostly neat. Yeah, I'll mostly take it neat. And again, it depends. If I'm just having a whiskey to enjoy it, then it'll normally be neat. But if we're in more of a kind of professional situation where you're trying a handful of whiskies, then you want to add a bit of water to bring them down, because you can't go through too many samples at full strength.
Because I came into this thinking, right, every expert's going to say, take it with water. Right? I remember my father-in-law would always have his whiskey and he'd double the quantity with his water because the water releases the flavour. And then Max and I have talked before, and we said, well, Max said a piece of ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I take a piece of ice. You're neat.
Yes.
So of the three of us, nobody's going with the water.
Yeah.
Well, depending on where you stay, the Glasgow water got chlorine in it. So
Oh, we had the best water in the world in Glasgow, coming straight from Loch Lomond
I don't drink it. I filter it. I filter the tap water
in Glasgow.
Because it's got chlorine in it. So you have to think of, right, I'm going to put water in it. Well, check the water first. That would be my view on the water situation. There's nothing wrong with using the water, but for me, and Glasgow District Council could prove me wrong, it's chlorinated.
Gary?
Putting chlorine into a lovely dram like that would spoil it. Even if you only put a couple of drops in it, would spoil it.
Yeah, I mean, this man's got a much better palate than me, to be fair. Like, I don't know if I would pick up that much of the difference, but that is more of a trained palate versus a...
Wow. Well, hold that there. If you want to subscribe to Cask to Glass, just please go to whoever you subscribe to on the podcast world, and please subscribe to the podcast. So you're just neat.
Yes, yeah. If I'm just enjoying a whiskey in the house, I would go neat. Would be my...
You're blowing me away, the period. That's nice. So, what do you think the future of the whiskey world is, the whiskey market?
That's a very good question. I think we're
speaking
in
positively, because
it's
still a huge business.
We're in a challenging point of view just now, but I think the way you're seeing new distilleries kind of set up, nobody's going kind of gung ho and just doing massive silly things. I think they're very sensible approaches. The thing I'm really enjoying seeing, and it's like the Gowan, you're very spirit forward, like there's a very considered idea of the knowing what your distillery is going to be and what they're going to produce. I think we'll see it come back into growth for sure.
Yeah,
we'll go through a slight downturn, but we will get back into growth.
I remember covering a game in Japan, and the most famous Scot in Japan at the time was the woman who married the bloke who set up Suntory. She was Scottish.
Aye.
And there was a whole drama series in Japan about this Japanese guy who came to study our whiskey industry.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that we have that kind of reputation in Japan?
Yeah.
And Gary's too young, but the Whisky Loch in the 70s in Scotland, the majority of that Whisky Loch, i.e. the stuff that was left behind, went to Japan.
What was the Whisky Loch?
The Whisky Loch was
just a bit like the Butter Mountain Whisky Loch.
Like we've done all our blending and we've got our sums wrong, because the sums basically, and back then it wasn't like yes, we're going to do 2 million cases of Loch Lomond, so that means you need so many casks of Loch Lomond. But when it came round to 5 years down the line or 6 years down the line, we only sold 1 million, so you're left with a lot of stuff. So what was left became the Whisky Loch, and the majority of it went in tank to Japan, and that's when they went, oh wait a minute,
we like this.
I like this. Let's see how we can make this. And maybe the chap from Suntory thought, well, what's the best thing to do here? I'll go over to Scotland and I'll meet Gary or meet me and take him back over to Scotland, back over to Japan, get them started. But no, he met, as you said, John, he met this lovely girl.
Yeah. I can't remember where she was from. And also
She possibly Campbelltown. So I know they kind of spent a good bit of time in Campbelltown.
Could have been.
And some of the distilleries down there.
Tell me more about your other whiskies then. You've got
Right, so we should move on to the single malts then. Right. So the single grain is everything by bar name, a single malt. It's the process that means we need to call it a single grain. The next one is then Loch Lomond 12 Perfectly Balanced, which really, like I said, embodies our signature style. So it's that fruit, honey sweetness and soft smoke. So it's a marriage of 4 of our spirits. So from a combination of the Swan Neck still and the Straight Neck still. So it's the Straight Neck that really kind of turbocharges the fruit character. The two collection strengths from that still. One comes off at 85, which, like I said, is that turbocharging the fruit character, and one at 65. And that's one of the...
So this is the single malt?
Yes, single malt, but like I said, a marriage of 4 spirits.
Honey is the first thing.
Yes, so that's the...
I would even go so far as to say acacia honey. Because I had acacia...
Like I said, more
only because I had acacia honey in my toast this morning. No, honestly, it's definite honey. Yeah. It's like what's the New Zealand honey? Manuka honey is a class above the rest.
Different
That's what it's like.
So the honey sweetness comes from the exclusive use of American oak. So let's say everything's matured. In fact, all of these are exclusively ex-bourbon. So whether it's first fill, refill, or recharred. So in terms of the fruit character, personally for me, so I would always say, tasting notes for me in whiskey, I always view as a guide. They are written by guys like Max or
your press
blenders.
Your
well, sometimes. It's always a guide. That's kind of one or two people's interpretation, and it's just to give you an idea of. So if you don't get what's on the box, it doesn't mean your palate's wrong. That's just how your palate is interpreting that. So it's personally for me, I get a lot of white flesh fruits, also kind of nectarine, peach up front. Then I get the honey comes through in the palate, and then it's a wisp of soft smoke just in at the tail end.
Soft smoke. And the soft smoke, it doesn't seem to be in the palate. In the nose, rather. No. You get it in the palate.
And it's right in at the tail end, and that's exactly how our master blender, Michael Henry, wanted it to be. He ultimately uses our peated spirits in the same way a chef uses salt and pepper. So it's using it as season. So you don't want that smoke to be the dominant the flavour. But what you do want to do is it helps bring everything together and it helps elevate the other flavours that are there.
We'll get back to tasting more Loch Lomond whiskies with Gary and Max in a second. But remember, you can save 10% on your own bottle. Make sure you're subscribed to Cask to Glass on your podcast player or YouTube. Go to the Loch Lomond Whiskies website. Use the discount code Cask to Glass 10 at checkout. The first 100 people who use that code will get 10% off their order. Full terms and conditions are in our show notes. And thank you for listening to Cask to Glass. Do you insure all the master blenders? Would you have a special insurance policy for you and your nose? What happens?
Well, they insure in the perfume industry.
Yeah.
You know,
the noses.
Somebody said to me, Max, you want your nose insured?
Who said that?
If somebody asked me that, I would just say, look, don't be silly, away you go. I don't deal in romantics, and I'm sure Gary doesn't deal in romantics. We deal in, like I said earlier, get this good, make sure it's good the next time round. So we're talking about, you heard me earlier, education and respect. If you can get somebody to buy a bottle of that today, enjoy it. That's what it's all about, and I'm sure that's what Michael does as well.
And ideally buy another bottle after the finish.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
But there are, as much as we've got guys like Max and their noses and their palates, it happens a lot through the stages. Even the coopers will be nosing casks, and they'll be able to tell if they open a cask whether that cask's soured or it's coming to the end of its life. But it's even down to putting these things through the labs. A lot of the stuff that we know we're looking for from a flavour point of view, we can break down chemically to say that we know exactly what we're looking for. But even at the other side of the kind of chemicals that we want to avoid that come with some of those impurities as well.
Max was telling me earlier on that he thinks in Scotland we don't know enough about whiskey, even though we have this product. Yeah. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think there's probably a very small proportion of people that are very, very into whiskey and want to know everything about of all single malts. I think that broader general education. I mean, my dad was a whiskey drinker all these days, and it was. I'd been working with the company for 8 years or so, and he still said to me, he's like, "So, like, where do you get your peaty water from?" Dad, that's not where the peat comes from. And it's just these kind of common misconceptions that seem to still exist.
You're talking about dads. I remember my dad. We would sit I've said to Max, in the jungle of Borneo. I'd be 4 years old, and my dad would be on the veranda of his rubber estate with his gun in one hand. This is true. Me beside him, a wee nip of whiskey, and his pipe band music on, and he'd be shooting things, just shooting into the dark at 6 o'clock, going, "Scotland's a great place, son." And that's my first memory of whiskey. And it's your dad, isn't it? Your dad going, "This is Scotland in a glass," and the pipe band music. It's fantastic. I know, I'm diverting. But you've given us two of them.
Yep.
Even different colours.
Yes.
You know, different colours. And then different tastes. But you're saying this is the honey and the sweetness.
Yeah, so like I said, this really embodies that kind of signature style of Loch Lomond. So we've got 3 12-year-olds. So you won't find many other distilleries that will have maybe 1 or 2, maybe 2 official bottlings of the same age. I don't think there's any other ones that will get 3. So you've got 3 single malts, so all made at Loch Lomond, all 12 years old, obviously, matured in the same place, using the same barley, and importantly the same cask. It's all bourbon casks.
Yeah.
So the difference you're getting in the flavours comes exclusively through the distillations.
And you're impressed, Max?
Yeah.
like it?
You know, the one question I would ask, Gary, is this natural colour?
No, unfortunately not. We are moving the Loch Lomond releases to natural colour is the plan.
So it's got caramel.
Yes, yeah.
But lots of whiskies have, the blends have caramel.
And a lot of single malts.
Yeah.
Do they?
Oh, absolutely.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can't get the colour from the cask, it goes in...
You know, most of the colour will come from the cask. Yeah. A lot of times it's done for kind of consistency. Especially if you're going to be bottling something regularly, then it's about making sure that bottling of the 12-year-old this year looks the exact same as the bottling of the 12-year-old next year.
We'll do one more.
Right, super. So this then really embodies the kind of character of Loch Lomond spirit. So this is exclusively from our straight neck stills. So as I said, these were designed by Duncan Thomas, and the concept behind these stills was, so Little Mill being a lowland whisky. Lowland whiskies historically triple distilled, and he designed these stills to be able to recreate a triple distilled spirit using only double distillation. So it's through our kind of rectifying head, a straight neck with perforated copper plates inside. So this is from the high collection strength, 85% comes off, bottled at 46. So rather than the white flesh fruits you were getting in the perfectly balanced, this is really into orchard fruits, green apple, green pear. It's quite kind of floral. It's got that lowland kind of style.
Granny Smith.
Yeah,
Granny
exactly.
Smith. I know you sniff with one nostril. Is that right?
I'll always try and go
nostril?
across. Yeah, there'll be, and again, it's you will pick up sometimes different smells from different side.
Would you?
Yeah.
Depends on the size of your nose.
Well, I wouldn't take that too personally, Max. It's all right.
No, I'm looking at John's. I need a bigger one.
Mine's been repaired a few times. That's nice too.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Slàinte.
I know Slàinte. Tell me about the shape of the glass. So this is
Capita style, so kind of tulip style, bulbous. It's all about kind of building, keeping the aromas in the glass, funneling them up to the top. So that's probably the preferred choice for nosing. Where it's not necessarily the kind of glass I would use if I'm drinking at home. To be honest, I'm not that fussy about mine.
No.
Whether it's a tumbler or a Capita or a wine glass. No, I'm sorry, that's
it strikes me. Yeah, exactly. You can drink it out of whatever you want to drink it, can't you? You don't have to do this. You can drink it out of a little tumbler with a bit of ice or water or neat or whatever. But you must be very proud of the heritage. I was thinking, as we came in today, Max's place down at Ardgowan, beautiful, stunning. That view down the west coast. And if you've not been to the west coast of Scotland, it is paradise.
Yeah, it's
Isn't
beautiful.
It? The ferry trips, the islands.
We're biased, obviously,
but also you and the Loch. It's just that heritage of having Loch Lomond and being in that location that you must be very proud of it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's when you tell anybody that you work in the whisky industry, I've always
Go, how do I get into it?
Well, yeah, that tends to be question number 2. But everybody's got questions, and there is that wonderful romantic image of it. But ultimately, we're in a job where we are very fortunate to be able to. Where I'm paid to drink and talk about whiskey. I mean, it's very lucky I enjoy whiskey as well, to be fair. But yeah, I get to talk about something that I love, and it's inherently linked with where I'm from. And it just comes back to that kind of Scottish character as well. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
And I think there's also, you don't meet an awful lot of people who talk about something that they love.
Yeah.
I think you find in most, someone who's doing, Gary and I, you could do it as well about rugby probably. Yeah. Gary and I could sit here for hours and talk about whiskey because we love it. That was a great word, inherent. It's in there. Yeah. It's in here. It's in your heart. You could talk about it for hours. You wouldn't necessarily have to drink it for hours, but no. you would talk about it for hours because we're so proud of it. I think maybe inherent and proud of the product that we produce as well. Nationwide. We're all proud of what we do individually, but inherent and proud and respect and things like that, it should be at the top of the alphabet when it comes to Scotch whisky, without a shadow of a doubt.
That's maybe a good way to end, isn't it? Sadly. We could. That's the trouble. You could talk about this for 2 hours, couldn't you?
And
We could sip it.
the bar's open. The bar's open. It's 11:05.
But you could sip away at this. You could talk
Exactly.
away for hours,
Oh,
couldn't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I really thank you for your time. It's a great, lovely product, great part of the world. And Gary, thank you. Max, thank you very much indeed for that. And as you would say, Slàinte var.
Slàinte var.
Thanks.
Slàinte var.
Cheers.
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 Thanks.
Cheers, man.
Yeah.
Till the next
Cheers,
time.
man.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives?